Welcome. It is great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to this one.
So when you evaluate global power, the default metrics usually involve, massive defense budgets.
Right, or fleets of stealth aircraft.
Exactly, or the sheer destructive scale of nuclear arsenals. We tend to measure influence in numbers and advanced technology.
Which makes sense on paper.
It does. But today's deep dive proves that the ultimate power on Earth is frequently determined by something much simpler and much older. Geography.
Geography truly is the foundational layer of geopolitics. I mean, a tight mountain pass or a specific shipping corridor control those features, and you can dictate the fate of entire economies without firing a single shot.
And that brings us to our single critical source for today. It's an analytical brief titled The Strait of Hormuz, Global Energy's Strategic Chokepoint.
It is a fantastic brief.
It really is. Our mission today is to figure out why a tiny 33-kilometer-wide strip of water basically holds the entire global economy hostage.
Sure.
And we want to understand the cascading effects if that specific waterway suddenly becomes a battlefield. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Whether you are prepping for a global strategy meeting or you are just insanely curious about the hidden levers of international trade, you are in the right place.
We should establish the stakes immediately here. We're not discussing standard logistics.
Right.
Or the routing of general cargo. We are talking about the literal lifeblood of the global economy.
The energy that powers everything.
Exactly. Industrial manufacturing, electrical grids, worldwide transportation, it all depends directly on this specific geographic feature. If the flow stops there, the heartbeat of the global market skips.
So let's look at the sheer physical constraints of this bottleneck. The Strait of Hormuz connects the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean.
The gateway to the open ocean.
Yeah. And at its absolute narrowest navigable point, it is barely 33 kilometers wide.
Which is incredibly small.
It's nothing. That is basically the distance from the suburbs to downtown in most major cities. You could drive it in half an hour.
Easily.
But the detail from the brief that really stands out is the deep water channels. Because supertankers cannot just sail freely anywhere in that 33-kilometer span, can they?
They absolutely cannot. Those ultra-large crude carriers require significant depth just to avoid running aground.
Right. They sit so deep in the water.
Exactly. The actual navigable shipping lanes, the deep water channels that can safely accommodate their draft, are only a few kilometers wide in each direction.
Wow. A few kilometers.
You have colossal vessels, some stretching over 1,000 feet long, carrying millions of barrels of crude, navigating what is essentially a maritime tightrope.
A tightrope is the perfect word for it.
The turning radius alone on these ships means any sudden obstacle presents an immediate crisis. They just can't stop or turn in time.
And the volume squeezing through that tightrope is astounding. We are looking at nearly 20% of the world's entire petroleum consumption moving through that tiny gap every single day.
Every single day?
1 in every 5 barrels of oil used globally. Plus, a massive chunk of global liquefied natural gas LNG passes through those exact same waters.
It's staggering when you look at the map.
It is. When you look at the major exporters, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, their primary export routes all converge on this one single door.
What's fascinating here is how the Strait of Hormuz compares to other strategic maritime corridors mentioned in the brief, places like the Suez Canal.
Or the Panama Canal.
Right, or the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Each represents a critical node in our global logistics system. But Hormuz is fundamentally different in its impact.
How does the brief differentiate them? I mean, if the Suez Canal gets blocked, which we've literally seen happen recently, the supply chain disruptions are incredibly severe.
They are, absolutely. But the distinction lies in the cargo.
Okay.
The Suez or Panama canals primarily affect general trade, consumer goods, manufactured parts, electronics.
So if a vessel gets stuck there,
your factory might wait longer for microchips, or retail shelves might temporarily empty out.
Right. Annoying, but not instantly fatal.
Exactly. Hormuz directly controls the world's hydrocarbon energy supply. In a global economy still overwhelmingly dependent on oil and gas, shutting down Hormuz doesn't just delay retail inventory.
It cuts the power.
It paralyzes the underlying system that allows the rest of the supply chain to function at all.
Yeah. So if this waterway is the planet's primary energy artery, who controls the banks? Let's look at the map again. Iran sits directly on the northern coast.
They dominate that entire northern shoreline.
Yeah, its mainland, its islands, its naval bases, they are perched continuously along that critical channel, directly overlooking the narrow, deep-water lanes we just discussed.
That geographic reality affords Iran a phenomenal strategic advantage.
Because they're right there.
They possess a front-row seat and direct access to the most vital economic transit point on the globe.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You would naturally assume that to threaten a major maritime choke point, a nation would need a formidable, conventional blue-water navy.
Huge cruisers.
Right? Heavy destroyers, aircraft carriers. But the brief outlines Iran's naval doctrine, and it relies entirely on asymmetric warfare.
It's a completely different approach.
They deploy fast attack boats designed to swarm larger vessels. They maintain extensive stockpiles of anti-ship missiles.
They utilize cheap but deadly naval mines.
Yes, and position coastal missile batteries along the shore. Plus, they increasingly rely on drone strikes. So, how does a fleet of small speedboats and drones realistically threaten commercial shipping backed by global superpowers?
The strategic concept driving this is known as area denial.
Area denial.
Right. Iran does not need to outright control the water. They don't need to establish absolute naval supremacy.
They don't need to win a traditional naval battle.
Exactly. They only need to make the strait too dangerous for commercial vessels to traverse. By layering these asymmetric capabilities, the sea mines, the swarm boats, the coastal batteries, they create an unpredictable, high-risk zone.
And commercial shipping is ultimately a business.
100%.
If a shipping company thinks their multi-million-dollar vessel and its cargo are going to take a missile hit, they simply won't sail.
It all comes down to maritime insurance. Underwriters classify specific regions as war risk zones.
Makes sense.
If Iran credibly threatens the strait, insurance premiums for vessels entering the Gulf skyrocket to commercially unviable levels.
That is, if underwriters even agree to issue policies at all.
Precisely. If the insurance evaporates, the tanker fleets freeze in port. The flow of oil stops just as effectively as if a physical concrete wall had been built right across the waterway.
The brief details that this isn't purely theoretical either. Iran has demonstrated this area denial capability repeatedly.
They do it to send a message?
Right. They have simulated closing the strait during military exercises. They've seized foreign oil tankers in the past and deployed naval mines during periods of high tension.
The source notes their message is crystal clear.
Which is?
If Iran's economy faces existential threats, they possess the leverage to turn the Strait of Hormuz into a pressure point felt by every economy on Earth.
They are signaling that any economic or military pressure placed on them carries a global consequence.
Exactly. And because of that constant underlying threat to the global economy, we see the involvement of other major powers stepping in to try and balance the scales.
That brings us to the counterforce. Because the global economy requires that oil, the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet is headquartered right next door in Bahrain.
Just a stone's throw away.
Their mandate revolves around safeguarding maritime security across the Persian Gulf.
The foundational doctrine for the United States in this region is freedom of navigation.
Freedom of navigation.
It is the principle that no single power can close an international maritime choke point. The global commons must remain open for international trade, and the U.S. positions overwhelming conventional military force there to ensure it.
We're talking about aircraft carriers, guided missile destroyers, advanced submarines, state-of-the-art surveillance networks.
The best tech in the world.
Right. In terms of pure firepower, the brief emphasizes the profound superiority of American forces over Iran's military. But wait. If the U.S. Fifth Fleet is parked right next door with state-of-the-art destroyers, how does Iran realistically pose a threat without being immediately neutralized?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look back at the extreme limitations of the geography.
The 33 kilometers again.
Yes. Even overwhelming state-of-the-art American military power cannot eliminate the physical constraints of the strait. As we discussed, the Deepwater Channel is only a few kilometers wide.
So a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier is essentially operating in a bathtub.
That is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
A Nimitz-class aircraft carrier or an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer has almost zero maneuvering room in those lanes.
They are sitting ducks.
Their reaction time against close-range swarms of fast attack boats launching from the Iranian coastline is severely compressed.
Because the coast is right there.
Right. Plus, the acoustic environment of the strait is incredibly noisy, making submarine and mine detection exceptionally difficult.
I hadn't even thought about the acoustics.
It's a huge factor. A swarm of armed drones or a few well-placed, inexpensive naval mines can inflict severe damage before advanced defensive systems can fully respond.
It seems like a glaring tactical mismatch. A sea mine costs a few $1,000s.
Sometimes less.
And it can blow a hole in a billion-dollar warship. Or, more likely, the commercial oil tanker that the warship is trying to escort.
The U.S. Navy certainly possesses the capability to eventually clear mines or suppress coastal batteries, but the immediate disruption is inevitable.
It takes time.
And the delay of even a few weeks to secure the waterway triggers the economic fallout we mentioned earlier. The brief clearly illustrates how geography can effectively neutralize technological and conventional military superiority.
You cannot engineer your way out of a 33-kilometer bottleneck.
You really can't.
Let's follow that economic fallout. Say an incident occurs, the waters are deemed unsafe, and underwriters pull the insurance. The tankers stop moving.
The nightmare scenario.
The economic domino effect outlined in our source seems catastrophic. First, oil prices surge. The brief notes that, historically, even the mere perception of risk in the Gulf triggers price spikes.
Just a rumor can do it.
But an actual sustained disruption, prices could reach levels that fundamentally destabilize global markets.
The shockwave propagates instantly. Countries heavily dependent on imported energy face astronomical, unforeseen costs,
which injects inflationary pressure across their entire domestic economies.
Financial markets price in a global industrial slowdown, triggering widespread panic. Supply chains experience cascading failures because the fuel required to move the goods, whether by ship, truck, or plane, suddenly costs twice as much.
This transitions us perfectly to a highly specific case study from the source. India.
A fascinating example.
For India, the Strait of Hormuz is not some distant geopolitical chess match. It is a matter of national survival.
Absolutely.
They rely heavily on Gulf oil flowing through Hormuz to prevent energy shortages. If that road is disrupted, what does the immediate impact look like on the ground for them?
Well, India imports a substantial majority of its crude oil, and the bulk of that originates in the Persian Gulf. An interruption means physical energy shortages, almost immediately.
You would see industrial activity forced to halt.
Manufacturing plants cannot operate. Power grids face severe strain. The increased cost of whatever oil they can secure drives up transportation costs, which immediately increases the price of food and basic necessities across the subcontinent.
The brief also brings up a critical human element here. Millions of Indian citizens live and work in the Gulf countries.
It's a massive diaspora.
Their physical safety during a regional conflict is obviously a concern, but the source emphasizes the economic tie as well.
Those expatriates work across various sectors, construction, engineering, healthcare, and they send substantial remittances back to the Indian economy.
We're talking about billions of dollars annually.
Billions. That money supports families and local economies within India. If a conflict shuts down the Gulf's economic engine, those workers lose their livelihoods.
The remittances stop.
And the financial pain compounds the already severe energy crisis India would be experiencing domestically.
India's domestic stability and the livelihoods of a huge portion of its diaspora are inextricably linked to the stability of this one small waterway.
They are completely exposed.
So what does this all mean for the countries actually pumping the oil? If you are Saudi Arabia or the UAE, your entire national revenue is sitting behind this incredibly vulnerable door.
It's a terrifying position for them.
How are they mitigating this? The brief points out they have invested heavily in naval modernization, but more notably, they have built alternative pipelines to the Red Sea to bypass the strait entirely.
They have spent billions constructing overland pipelines that pump crude to export terminals on the Red Sea or the Gulf of Oman, circumventing the Chokepoint.
Makes sense.
It is a logical strategic hedge to ensure at least some revenue continues to flow during a crisis.
But the source emphasizes a critical flaw in that plan. Those pipelines simply cannot handle the sheer volume of oil that normally flows through Hormuz.
Not even close.
Relying on them to replace the strait is like trying to replace a 6-lane commercial superhighway with a single-lane dirt road.
That's a great analogy.
The barrel-per-day flow rates of those bypasses just don't come close to meeting global demand.
The infrastructure limits are a hard ceiling. Those alternative routes can perhaps handle a few million barrels a day.
While Hormuz routinely sees around 20 million.
Exactly. The Gulf states remain fundamentally dependent on the continued stability of that narrow maritime corridor. They can alleviate a small fraction of the pressure, but they cannot eliminate their exposure.
There is another major player deeply embedded in this equation: China.
Yes, we have to talk about China.
China is the world's largest oil importer. A huge portion of their energy originates in the Middle East, travels through Hormuz, and crosses the Indian Ocean to power their industrial base.
This raises an important question regarding future geopolitics. Historically, Beijing maintains a strict policy of avoiding military entanglement in Middle Eastern conflicts.
They like to keep it strictly business.
They prefer to focus entirely on commerce and infrastructure investments. However, as their economic engine becomes increasingly reliant on Middle Eastern energy, the security of that supply line becomes an existential strategic concern for them.
So if the Strait of Hormuz were seriously threatened, could China afford to remain neutral?
The brief suggests this dynamic could force a profound shift. With China steadily expanding its naval presence and port investments across the Indian Ocean, Beijing might eventually abandon its traditional non-interference stance.
Because they have to protect their oil.
They may feel compelled to play an active military role in securing their own energy lifeline. That would introduce an entirely new superpower into an already congested and tense geographic space.
You would have the U.S. Fifth Fleet, Iran's asymmetric forces, modernizing Gulf navies, and potentially an expanding Chinese naval presence, all maneuvering around the same tight shipping lanes.
It's a powder keg.
And right in the middle of all those transit routes across the Indian Ocean sits India. The source details how India is already taking proactive steps rather than just hoping for the best.
India occupies a central position in the Indian Ocean. The sea lanes connecting the Gulf to East Asia run right past their coastline.
So they are stepping up.
They are strengthening their naval presence, regularly conducting patrols in the Arabian Sea, and participating in international maritime security initiatives to protect commercial shipping.
They are also building deep economic resilience. The brief explains India is diversifying its energy suppliers to reduce dependence on the Gulf.
A smart move.
Crucially, they are constructing strategic petroleum reserves. They are literally pumping millions of barrels of crude into vast underground storage facilities.
Like salt caverns and rock excavations.
To create a buffer. If Hormuz closes, they can tap those reserves to keep their factories running and their power grids online while the crisis unfolds.
They are layering diplomatic engagement, military presence, and physical oil stockpiles to counter their geographic vulnerability.
It is a comprehensive approach.
It is. They are acknowledging that they cannot change the geography, but they can build layers of defense, both military and economic, to protect themselves from the vulnerabilities that geography creates.
It is a remarkable geopolitical web. We started this deep dive evaluating power through the lens of high-tech weaponry and defense budgets.
And we ended up talking about a 33-kilometer stretch of water.
Right. Synthesizing all the logistics, tactics, and economic data from the brief, it is striking to realize that in an era of artificial intelligence and globalized finance, the world economy remains entirely tethered to a narrow geographic bottleneck.
Geography dictates the board.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this exploration. It illuminates just how deeply interconnected international energy security is and how a disruption in one specific channel can paralyze the entire system.
We've spent this entire deep dive discussing how geography dictates global power because of the world's reliance on oil and gas. But ask yourself this. If the global economy eventually transitions away from hydrocarbons to renewable energy grids, how will the map of global power shift? Will the Strait of Hormuz lose its grip on the world? And what new choke points, perhaps the shipping routes for critical minerals, will take its place?
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard podcast. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh podcasts every Monday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Podcast. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.